Thank you everyone again for being here. It is a pleasure to have you. And our last conversation was riveting, so much so I know that we had a shorter break, but we will have another one. For this next panel though, we are very excited to welcome the SMU leadership. And I would like to emphasize, and I should have emphasized this in the last panel, in your booklets, you will find the biographies of all of our presenters today. So please take a moment, read through the biographies, and get to know them and their accomplishments a little bit more, because I will be doing fairly brief introductions. But we are ecstatic to have with us on the stage Dean Janarthanan, Jayawickramarajah, who is the Dean of the SMU Dedman College of Humanities and Sciences, Dean Todd, who is the Dean of the SMU Cox School of Business, and our discussant, the Dr. James Hollifield, the acting director of the SMU Mission Foods Texas-Mexico Center. And they will share with us why SMU is important, why this center is important, and how it relates to the broader theme of the Texas-Mexico Center. So everyone, please offer them a round of applause to welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. And sorry, we're going to do this in English, but I know we have lots of interpreters who can help you if you have a little trouble with the English. But I'm so pleased to see many colleagues, many friends here, new friends, old friends, some of my students, former students. I hope you will have a chance to meet the students as well. And this panel is going to be about the university, education, human capital. And if you look at the Texas-Mexico Center, you will see we have these five areas of expertise. I don't think anyone can talk about Texas-Mexico without talking about migration, right? Pretty big deal. I don't think we can talk about Texas-Mexico without talking about the border, right? Another big deal. But did we hear something earlier about trade? I heard some things about trade, investment, and energy. Why is energy so important? These are two, Texas and Mexico. Energy, such a key part of the economy. But the fifth area, our fifth area of focus in this center, this is what I want you to think about this morning, is education and human capital. This is a key. It's a key for the success of our two countries, our two societies. I see some of my colleagues who are college professors shaking their head out there. Yes, my colleague Raymond Robertson sitting here from Texas A&M University. I don't know if Larry Rubin is still around, but we have many great universities in Texas. A lot of you in this room probably studied in some of those universities. So we are building relationships between these universities in Texas, universities in Mexico, and SMU. You might say, why SMU? Well, we are sitting at ground zero. We're pretty far from the border, but we are in the heart of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Over 8 million people now and growing. I don't know if I'm going to exaggerate, but one of the most dynamic economies in the United States. The connections with Mexico are extraordinary. And SMU is right in the middle of this. And the Texas-Mexico Center is poised to help lead greater integration between Texas and Mexico, and by extension between the United States and Mexico. I don't know if we have any Canadians out there in the audience. I'm tempted to ask if, but let's not forget about Canada. Canada has a big presence in DFW, in Texas, and of course in Mexico. So I'm just going to stop and say that you can take this one and think about it. Dallas-Fort Worth is the capital of NAFTA. It's the capital of North America, in my view, and SMU is sitting there helping to lead this North American integration. So I'm going to turn our attention now to what SMU is doing in two of the most important schools at SMU. We have many schools there, but we have two of them represented today. Both of them are supporters home to the Texas-Mexico Center. So I'm going to start with my colleague, Dean Jayawickramarajah. He's going to tell us a bit about what's going on in Dedman College, which is the College of Humanities and Sciences. And then we'll hear from my colleague, Dean Todd Milbourn, who joined us. Both of these gentlemen just recently joined SMU. So they're newcomers. So they've got a fresh perspective on things. So please join me first. Let's hear from Dean Jayawickramarajah.
Thanks, Jim. So before I talk about Dedman College, I guess I'm going to say a few words. First, thanks again, Jim, Courtney, Astrid, and the rest of the Mission Foods, SMU Mission Foods, Texas Mexico Center for organizing this event. It's delightful to see all of you here. The topics today are driving growth and security across borders. And I am glad these are both very important topics. But I'm glad that, when we typically think, at least in the US, there's a public perception that, a lot of the Texas-Mexico interaction is driven through the border security issue. But really, as we've been hearing today, the big part of the Texas-Mexico interaction is economy and economic growth. So I'm glad that both are kind of, front and center in this symposium. Just a couple of words, of course, in terms of Texas-Mexico economy and economic growth. I think we heard Larry say in 2024, we have over 280 billion in terms of trade between the state of Texas and Mexico. And Texas is the biggest exporting state in the US. And from the Mexican standpoint, if you consider Texas as a separate country, I know some Texans think that that's possible. I know that's not true, and that was kind of figured out and dusted a while ago. But if Texas was a country, I think from a Mexican perspective, the economic cooperation would be number 2 after the United States as a whole. So again, really important interaction, right? So I just want to give you that kind of brief about the economy. On the other side, we have the border, and I think 64% of the border, the US-Mexico border is in Texas, and the vast majority of the crossing points. So, again, Texas plays a big role. There are genuine border issues in terms of immigration, legal or illegal, drug trafficking, et cetera. But also, as we heard earlier today, there's huge number of people crossing the border in terms of trade, in terms of commerce, in terms of people visiting families on either side. And so that, it's a vibrant place and it's important. So Jim, you have something to add to that, or? Oh, I thought you had something to add.
Let's hear now from our colleague in the business school. I don't know how many of you out there have studied business, but business is key to this relationship. So let's hear from Dean Milbourn. I'll try to ask a few more questions and see if you have any questions. Dean Milbourn.
Buenos dias. There we go. So Todd Milbourn, I am the newly appointed Dean of the Cox School of Business at SMU. I am most delighted to be here. Let me add my thanks to Jim and the whole team for putting this on. A business school, they were listing the 5 topics at the beginning, trade and investment, the business of energy, human capital, migration, and border. And I think the beauty of this research center being jointly housed between the Dedman Humanities and Sciences and the Cox School of Business allows us to basically overlap and have thought leadership, educational training, students, and working with companies and other organizations. We get to span all of those. Now, I am a finance professor by training. I'm sitting next to an organic chemist, which means he's a lot smarter than me, but I know how the money works and where those things go. When we think about the business school, I mean, we're in the midst of our strategic planning right now, and this center absolutely is fitting in the direction where our strategic plan is going. A very big sort of high-level vision for the Cox School of Business is that we want to be at the intersection of anything and everything that's driving the economic engine and entrepreneurial ecosystem of Dallas and beyond. As we know, and clearly the participants here, there's something we would call some endogeneity. We self-selected to be here. We know how important the relationship between Mexico and in particular Texas, not just the US, is to driving that economic growth. And that's a big piece that we're leaning into. A couple things, and I think they will come up from here. As we look through, the supply chain is so inextricably linked between the two. And as we think as a business school, we've got operations faculty and the finance faculty. Obviously, the finance side understands sort of how do we can get financing, how do we make sure that resources go to the right spot. But on the supply chain, it was a little fact that I'd heard. I was talking to a senior partner from Bain. He said, the supply chain linkages, and he gave me a turbine as an example. A turbine crosses the border 10 times before it's ready. That's just staggering to me. And I think the thought leadership that can come out of things like this, and I'm really excited to hear what the research panels are later, are many of the things that we try to do at the core at the business school. So I'll kind of stop there because I know Jim has a lot of questions, and I know they run a very tight ship here. So I'm watching that clock count down as if I'm in Mission Impossible right now.
Courtney's going to stop us exactly at the right moment. But I think I would like to turn our attention back to an issue I think should be on everyone's mind in this room. And that is the issue of the integration between Texas and Mexico. How do we think about that issue of integration? And what role do our universities play in leading this? And in terms of educating the next generation of leaders. And, when I use this term integration, I'm using it rather broadly, but I think all of you in the room know that there's been a lot of negative publicity about the relationship between Texas and Mexico and the US and Mexico. But one thing that we want to do here in this conference, and I want to hear a bit more from my colleagues up on the stage here about this. We need to think about all of the positive things that are going on between Texas and Mexico. Yes, there's a history, but we are moving this relationship forward. I know this is a bit of a cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. We're building bridges, not walls. So we want to think about how this integration is going to work. And before I turn it back to my colleagues, I just want to say that we have people in this room. We have a company in Gruma Mission Foods, which epitomizes the positive relationship between the US and Mexico. So I think, Todd, maybe I'll turn back to you first. I think the business elite, a lot of you in this room here, that's the future of integration between our two countries, our two societies. More business, more investment, more trade, and increasing the wealth and the productivity of our two societies. So, and the universities are key to this because they bring the leaders together at a place like the Cox Business School or the Dedman School at SMU. So maybe I'll turn back to Todd very quickly. Maybe you could talk a bit more about how you would envision, building this relationship from an education and human capital standpoint. And don't be bashful. Talk a little bit more about the Cox School. It's a very, very strong, powerful school. So tell us a little bit more about Cox.
We are looking to be the best business school in all of Texas, and along with being the best university in Texas. That does give us some competition. I think where the role a academic institution plays is that we can really be a coordinating mechanism for a lot of different forces. I mean, one piece that Jim sort of alluded to, yes, there's a lot of noise and static about issues related to the two countries, but I think this is one where the data don't necessarily support those facts, right? The economic reality when you get in and talk to companies and what's happening, and we've got representatives here that can speak much more eloquently to that from our Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas with actually getting into the data, but there's just so much more that's there. The university side, and the thing that I really like about this research center is it hits the epitome to me of the purpose a research center should have as housed at an academic institution like SMU. What a research center does is tries to bring, and you got to kind of picture a Venn diagram of 3 circles. It tries to bring the students together with the faculty, together with the companies and business organizations that are there. A research center is all about trying to increase the area of intersection between those 3 circles. So from the standpoint of a research center, the talent side is one that we speak to. And obviously that is our mission, is to educate the next generation of business leaders and scientists and everyone else. I got to take care of my colleague over here. I'll be in trouble on the flight home tomorrow. It brings together, that starts to get that intersection between the companies that are hiring our students. But it also allows for the faculty to engage with the students, bringing these 2 circles together in ways that are more meaningful than just the traditional academic environment. And this is where you bring the 2 at the top together. As companies come in and share, these are the issues that we're dealing with, whether it's on the supply chain. How do I think about the integration of AI and what's changing? How do we cope with, as we're bringing more and more production away from China in particular, but from just the APAC countries in general, as it comes here, how do we work with these? Well, obviously, research scholars, we have 2 jobs. One is to teach, one is to do research. But identifying the research problems that are most salient, a research center brings those forces together so that we're not just out doing the nerdy Greek letter stuff. We're actually working on real present business problems. The sweet spot comes in when you can get all 3 of those areas to intersect, where you bring in a problem at a business level. You bring in thought leadership from the faculty to sort of run herd with the students, and you put a team of students on a particular business problem. Think of this as sort of more the co-curricular, or what's often called experiential learning. A research center enables that real-world practice where the students get real-world experience. They get to work on real problems. The companies get an early look at talent. And if it's done right, the companies ultimately get a piece of consulting work very much on the cheap that is actually going to help them to move their business forward. And it's that symbiotic relationship that I think a university can uniquely play. And we do that awesomely there so that I can trump up the Cox School of Business.
Well, to segue very quickly back to my dean, my colleague, Jayawickramarajah, great name, who comes originally from Sri Lanka. He is a chemist by training. And last night we were on our way to dinner, a great dinner hosted by Guruma Mission Foods, where we had a good exchange about a variety of subjects. But on the way to dinner, somehow the issue of medicine came up and pharmaceuticals. I'm looking at my colleague over here. We have another little institution in Dallas-Fort Worth, which you may have heard of, with which we work very closely. It's called the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Have you heard of that institution? My colleague, Pia Arrhenius, you're going to hear from her later. But she was stunned to hear that medicine, pharmaceuticals are connected to chemistry and petrochemicals. And over dinner last night, we got into a sensitive subject about GMO and corn. So if you think that these other subjects like chemistry are not directly related to what we're doing and what we're studying, no, they are. And Dedman College, as Dean Jayawickramarajah can tell you, we have many different disciplines. And we have other great schools at SMU. We have a fantastic engineering school. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what the college is doing, the kind of research that's going on, and how it's going to benefit the Texas-Mexico relationship.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. So Dedman College is, it's pretty big. It's, we've got humanities, social sciences, and sciences, 16 different departments ranging from psychology and sociology to mathematics, physics, data science to English, world languages. So it's very diverse. So I would say we're doing a lot in a variety of different areas. A slight distinction perhaps from the Cox School is, what we try to do is solve problems. I think business, you solve problems too, different
big
ways.
problems.
Yeah. But so what we really want to do and be known for is to solve the biggest problems facing society and humanity. And that can be medicine, it can be trade, it can be many different things. But I think this center really allows for us to address specific problems facing the issues that Jim just mentioned, energy and trade and human capital and education, all of that in the context of policy, in the context of research.
Yep.
And also I should mention, in addition to the 16 departments, we have 8 centers and programs with a significant focus on public policy.
Yep.
Jim is the director of the Tower Center, which focuses on international affairs and public policy. We have what's called DCII, which is an interdisciplinary center. We have the Texas-Mexico Center. So all of these come together in terms of synergy to really focus on research targeting public policy that can influence and help policymakers make decisions.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention one other school. We have a great law school too at SMU. Many students, Mexican, international students come there to study law. Have one friend, Syra, out there in the audience, who's an SMU law graduate. I hope you will have a chance to chat with her. So we are a university that covers many of these bases. Dallas-Fort Worth, as I said, an economic powerhouse. SMU is a leading university in DFW. And, we're going to be working with all of these different universities in Texas to make the integration of Texas and Mexico much, much stronger. And I think we've already established a very strong institutional tie. We have an old institutional tie with Tec de Monterrey. I know there are quite a few in the room here from Monterrey, which I don't know what Dallas's sister city is in Mexico, but I suspect Monterrey is up there near the top. So we are working with many different economic and political centers in Mexico, many different universities. I have colleagues who are coming today from the Colegio de Mexico, from ITAM, from UNAM. So, we are building these relationships and we're establishing networks in this meeting here. So I want all of you to do me a favor, go on the website, look at SMU, look at what we're doing, study our website, and you can find us. We're not hard to find. If you have children who are looking at universities in the United States, unabashed, you really should have a look at SMU as a place. And of course, we're going to be sending students to study in Mexico as well. We have a student ambassador here with us today and many of her family members, Miss Laura Rojas, who's sitting in the back there. So take a minute and talk to her about what she's studying at SMU. I mean, this is the future. These are the people who are going to build this relationship and make it work at the high end of the labor market. And of course, we know we have a tremendous, as my colleague Raymond Robertson would say, we have a single labor market. Mexico, Texas, certainly Mexico and Texas, basically a single labor market, a highly integrated labor market. We have another former student who's a recent graduate of SMU, Colin Dearson, who's sitting right here, who's here on a Fulbright scholarship. So I want you to think about this. Look at this university. Look at what we're doing. And think about how this next generation of leaders are going to make these two societies, these two economies, grow together, building bridges, not walls. So think about that, take away that message, go check out the website, and please come and talk to my colleagues. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have as well about SMU. So Courtney, I think are we out of time? Should we stop there? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.